My name is Steve Edelman, and I can tell you a little bit more about myself in a second. However, I want to welcome everybody to this special Facebook Live, and it is in partnership with the No Diabetes by Heart initiative, and that's a joint venture between the American Heart Association and the American Diabetes Association. And the initial intent of No Diabetes by Heart is to raise the awareness of heart disease in people with type 2 diabetes. However, since this initiative was started last year, I think more and more people realize that heart disease is a big issue with people with type 1 diabetes. And in fact, it's the number one cause of passing away for anybody in the United States, diabetic or not. So today's program is so important to everybody watching. It's talking about heart healthy diet. It has special benefits for people with type 2 diabetes, but really the kind of information we're going to talk about is beneficial for anybody. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my two guests, Adriana Valencia, and I'll let her introduce herself, but I work with her closely. She's a dietitian, and one of the champions of No Diabetes by Heart is Lupe Barraza. I got that name right, thank goodness. So Adriana, why don't you go first? Introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and then we'll go to Lupe.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Like Dr. Edelman said, my name is Adriana Valencia. I am a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator. I've been a dietitian for about 7 years now. It goes by so fast. And I've been working in diabetes for about 5 or 6 years. I absolutely love my job. I love talking to patients, helping people come up with some plans, seeing people meet their goals. I'm also very busy. I've got 2 little ones at home, so I understand the struggle of finding time to cook healthy and get activity in. But, there's a lot of different ways to kind of fit into your lifestyle. But I am happy to be here today with all of you to discuss some awesome topics, like Dr. Edelman said, that really we can relate to everybody.
Yeah, and I can just say that working with Adriana at the university it's so nice to have a dietitian, also has lots of knowledge about diabetes, obviously, but it's so nice to have someone that can really adapt, know her audience, from older individuals to younger, different ethnic groups, different backgrounds. And so it makes a huge difference, because most people, when you say, do you want to see a dietitian, they start rolling their eyes because they've had some negative experiences with dietitians that are pretty much stuck in the mud and have only learned things one way. Okay, Lupe, you are a champion, a No Diabetes by Heart champion, and tell us your story.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lupe Barraza. And my story is pretty interesting. I am a single mother of CPA, busy working from home, and 3 out of my 6 children still at home, 2 young ones. So yes, I agree. It is a struggle to try to get everything done. My story with type 2 diabetes started a little over 2 decades ago. My father is the youngest of 13 siblings, and he, along with 90% of my aunts and uncles, was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes when he entered his 40s. And so I lived growing up thinking this is going to be my future. It's just something that I am going to be looking forward to when I'm 40. My first marriage, I was married very young, right out of high school, and just enjoyed motherhood and had 4 awesome babies. But in the process, just devoted my life to my family and just lost track of my health. And so I gained about 80 pounds. Then when my child number 4 started school, I went back to college and received my bachelor's, master's, my CPA, and was diagnosed with prediabetes at that time. So I'm 5'2" and just over 210 pounds at the time. It was a lot for my small frame. I would, answer the phone and people would ask me, why are you running to the phone? I wasn't running. I was just walking, but I couldn't breathe. And so I just started doing what was easy. I laced up my shoes and I started walking. From walking, I have a very obsessive and competitive personality. So walking turned into running. And within about 6 months, I decided that I was going to run a marathon. Not a 5K, not a 10K, not a half marathon. I was going to run a marathon. So within a year, I trained and lost about 60, 70 pounds. I think it was 70 pounds that first time, and ran my first marathon. Got the bug, and within a 2-year span between 2010 and 2012, I became what is known in the running world as a marathon maniac. So I ran a marathon almost once a month. Actually, the New Year's between 2011 and 2012, I ran a double marathon. That was a double marathon weekend for me. So with all of that going on, unfortunately, my marriage couldn't survive that. I, went from being a depressed, heavy, barefoot and pregnant kind of mom to now I have a degree, I have a profession, and I love myself, and I'm happy because runners are happy. And unfortunately, it took its toll. So that marriage sadly ended, and I immediately rebounded into a second marriage that became very abusive, both physically and emotionally and verbally, for the next 7 years. And when I was going through that, I stopped running, and the weight came back. Sadly, I was not allowed to eat healthy. It was insulting. And being part of my culture, it's just what you do as a good wife is you just, you cater to your family. And so that's what I did. And, the weight came on to the point where that last year I was waking up with nerve damage. I could not make a fist. I would wake up with tingling in my hands and in my feet. When I finally gave in and went to the doctor because I wasn't taking care of myself medically either, and was diagnosed officially with type 2 diabetes. I was no longer pre-diabetic, I was diabetic. My glucose readings were close to the 400s, and my A1C was right under 12. So I was dying, and I knew what to do. I mean, I was a marathon maniac. I knew how to eat. I knew that I needed to exercise, but the environment around me wasn't allowing me to do that. And so that's when I had to take a step back and go take a new approach to my health, a more holistic approach. We know we need to do step 1, 2, and 3. You need to cut your sugars, you need to cut your fats, you need to exercise. But unfortunately, in the world that I was living in, it was, what is keeping me from doing that? I'm a smart girl. I have, degrees. I have a license, but I wasn't doing what I knew I needed to do. So the hardest step and the needed step was to move myself from that environment. So what my message has been is to take a step back and look at your entire world, your environment, not just the diet, not just the movement, but what is keeping us from making those decisions. And so when I was approached to join the No Diabetes by Heart campaign, I was a little hesitant because my story is so raw, but I was encouraged by a fellow from the previous year, one of my dearest friends, Christina Herrera. And, she said, you have a story and we need to hear it. And I took the chance, and it's been a ride. And that's been my message so far is just to move and change your environment. And you know what you need to do, but let's take a holistic approach and look at what all around us is keeping us from making those decisions. So.
Well, Lupe, thank you so much for sharing your story. You've been through a lot, and yeah, I mean, from going from the bottom to the top, and now leveling off at a point where you can share your story and help others. And I wouldn't be surprised that a lot of people can relate parts of your stories to their lives, and in some way. So what we ought to do is, I'll be interested to hear what you say regarding some of the issues we're going to talk about a heart healthy diet for
Yes.
people with diabetes. So just a few words before we get to the first couple questions. We already got questions on the different types of fat, artificial sweeteners. It's only my fourth can today. No, it's not. And also, the different type of diets out there, that the keto diet, the Mediterranean. So, but I think it's important to say first that adopting a healthy lifestyle can really help you manage your diabetes. It may also improve your critical health numbers, including managing the weight, blood sugar, blood pressure, and cholesterol. These are all factors that can lead to what we put together in a wastebasket term as cardiovascular disease. So through the support of family, friends, and community, and people living with type 2 diabetes and any type of diabetes, they can make the lifestyle and behavioral changes necessary that really help us maintain the proper weight and all these other cardiovascular risk factors. So making healthy choices are key. And it includes portion sizes, reading food labels. And I think that's always important. And, and looking at things that can help prevent and manage diabetes and the complications of diabetes. So what we should do first is just to open it up with a overarching question is about fat. The different types of fat we cook with, the different fats we eat. In the olden days, I remember when I was younger, and I should say that I have type 1 diabetes since I was 15. Fat was bad. And now the new mantra is fat is back. And so, Adriana, maybe you can start off and talk a little bit about the fats in our diet and the good fats, the bad fats, and things like that.
Yeah, so definitely fat has kind of gotten a little bit of a bad rap, right? And there's all these different fad diets where fat is taken out. Fat is definitely can be a healthy part of your diet. Fat is necessary for a lot of processes in our body as well. There are obviously some fats that are more heart healthy than others. The ones that we want to try and limit in our diet are going to be more saturated fats. Those are typically, most of us know those coming from animal products, right? So if you're going to drink something like whole milk, or you're going to have a lot of, beef in your diet, a high fat meat, that's going to be higher in saturated fat. So the fats that we want to try and really want to get our calories in from the fat is going to be more of the heart healthy, which are things like polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. And if you look at a nutrition label, you'll see that those are listed on there. So you can try to make a better choice. So that's going to include things like nuts, avocado, for example. Also, it's going to be the leaner meats are going to be lower in saturated fat. Things like chicken, fish, lean turkey, pork loin versus the higher fat ones I mentioned earlier. So yeah, fat is definitely an important part of our diets. It helps keep us full for a longer period of time as well. So I definitely don't encourage people to cut fat out.
Well, just real quickly before I ask Lupe a question, when you talk about polyunsaturated, mono, for us lay people, are you comparing olive oil to Crisco oil? I mean, so the kind of oils we should cook with.
Right. Good question. So if you look at the recommendations from the American Heart Association, they recommend using the more heart healthy oils. So we hear a lot about olive oil, for example. That's a great oil to drizzle on top of things. People make dressings out of them, but it's not a high heat temperature oil. So it's something that you may have done this. I know I have in the past. We try to saute something, we put olive oil, and you see that you kind of get the smoke cloud. It's not meant to heat up in a high heat temperature setting. So something like avocado or canola oil are more studied and have more heart health benefits if you're going to be doing something at a high heat, like saute, for example. So it's good to keep maybe two different oils in your kitchen, something like olive oil to use for drizzling or dressings, and one of a high heat temperatures like canola or avocado for your high heat cooking.
Yeah, well, Lupe, I'm going to make the assumption that you know how to make foods from your culture. And how do you make let Mexican food, Latino food, whatever,
Mhm.
more heart healthy? Because I think it has the reputation of being bad for you.
It sure does, and that's one of the things that I did is to keep in mind consistency and not make it a diet, make it a life choice, a life change, and that's what's going to keep us doing it. If you don't like to do something, you're not going to want to do it. So it's not changing my the foods we eat, it's just how we cook them. So instead of using, lard, instead of using bacon grease, changing to canola oil and olive oil. Um, one of the things that I learned a long time ago and taught myself is what it looks like outside my body when it's cold, that's what it's going to look like inside my body. So do I want that in me? So, of course, we're going to give in and have a hamburger now and then. And you're at a cookout and you're going to do that. But it all works together, right? We're moving, we're exercising, we're working together. But as far as the foods, I have taken out things like white rice, flour tortillas, things like that. So I changed that into vegetables, a salad, and then I may still have that taco, but it's not a fried corn tortilla. It's just over the heat. And instead of cooking with the oil, sometimes I'll just steam and then add vegetables and seasoning. So it's a lot of flavor, but it's the vegetables and the seasoning that's added to the chicken or to the meat, and then stay. One of the main things I do is I stay around the perimeter of the grocery store. I learned that a long time ago from a dietitian. Is if you're staying around the perimeter, you're good. Stuff in the middle, the chips, the
Yeah.
cookies,
Yeah. Well,
so
they put those everywhere nowadays. You can't even get away from those.
exactly. You get to the checkout counter and they're there. And I'm not saying don't ever have that. I'm not saying don't ever go to a Mexican restaurant and have, chips and salsa. Moderation, moderation. You can even bake your tostadas chips. You can bake those, and you've cut out a lot of the fat by not having them fried. So there are different things you can do to just change what you're normally eating and just change one thing about it, and you've cut out calories, you've cut out fat. Because if for me the focus was weight loss, and I'm an accountant, talk to me in numbers, calories in, calories out. How do I
tried giving myself a certain number of chips at the Mexican restaurant. If you, like you said, it's moderation.
Mhm.
And you got those chips in front of you with great salsa, and then it takes a while for your meal to get there. And like by the time the meal gets there, you've consumed a couple baskets of chips. So I think the challenge really is you take someone that's been brought up in their own ethnic foods, no matter what background you're from, it's hard to take away things people are used to, what they grew up with. It means a lot more than just food. It's memories. So I remember my mother making chicken soup.
Mhm.
And the next day she would put the pot in the fridge and all the chicken fat would go to the top and it was hard. And so, then, she would pull it off the top, but you're right. Go into the perimeter of the store, and if it gets cold and it's hard, then it's not good for you. Adriana, do you want to add anything on? We're going to talk about some of these fad diets next, but is there anything you want to add on to what Lupe said?
Lupe, those are some great points that you brought up. And I always tell patients, and I feel like I say it all the time, that whenever you make a change to your eating habits, you want to make sure they're sustainable,
Yes.
right? That it's really about you can still eat foods that are things that you grew up with, right? You don't have to take those out. Like, for example, people who are of Asian descent, my patients will tell me right away, I don't want to give up rice. And I eat, sometimes people are eating it with 3 meals a day. And I tell them, I'm not going to tell you have to give up rice. We talk about changing over to brown rice. If they don't like brown rice, they can do a white brown mix. If they're not into that, we just talk about reducing the serving, having those non-starchy vegetables. You definitely don't have to completely change how you're eating for you to eat healthier. You can still eat foods with your family. I tell patients all the time, these changes that you're making for your diet, for your lifestyle, other people in your family are going to notice and they may follow suit to that. So for example, if you have kids at home, your kids are going to notice all of a sudden there's more veggies on the table and they're going to be more likely to try that. If you're going for a walk in the evening, maybe your partner will join you. It's something that you start making these changes and leading as the example, other people in your family will start to notice and follow. So this can be, these changes that you're making can be really good for everybody in your family. And you don't have to make them these crazy diet that you follow, that you eliminate, and you're drinking smoothies and cabbage soup all day. It doesn't have to be an extreme like that. We don't recommend that, actually.
Well, that's great advice too. Well, I have a question for both of you. Being a type 1, we got to avoid carbs. And when you avoid carbs, you avoid calories. So the big thing is cauliflower rice. And I get cauliflower crust pizza. But my challenge is, how do you make cauliflower rice taste good? And I think it comes down to the kind of sauces you put on it. But any tips for our viewers? Because cauliflower rice is so low in calories, low in cholesterol. Okay, Lupe is ready to fall off her chair. Go ahead.
I don't know. Drown it in sauce. I don't like it, but I do love cauliflower. I'll roast cauliflower and broccoli, but the cauliflower rice, I'd rather not. I'd rather give me the whole cauliflower. So that just goes to, don't eat what you don't like. Don't force yourself to eat something you don't like. Eat what you like. Just change how it's cooked, and start slowly substituting things. Like one of our family's favorite is watermelon. So instead of sitting down having a bowl of cookies and milk, we'll chop up a watermelon and that's it. I mean, that's our sweet tooth. So it's making those small choices. Like even my brother is a pancreas and kidney transplant survivor. He also from complications of type 2 diabetes. And one of the things he started with, he's just said, Lupe, one of the first changes he made was taking off the bun from a hamburger. Simple. You start simple. Instead of the fries, get the fruit cup. So there are choices even out there in the fast food industry that you can make, but become informed. It is important to read the labels. It is important to know what you're putting in your body. We read everything else.
Yeah. In the big chain restaurants, fast food and regular ones, you can get the nutritional information online. It makes a huge difference to look at it. And it makes a big difference on what I choose. And if you can choose something you like that's half the calories, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, let's talk about all the crazy fad diets out there. The ketogenic diet, the paleo diet, the Mediterranean diet. My daughter's a vegan. I'm not even sure what that is. So I know we don't go to the Prime house with that. Maybe we do. Adriana, tell us a little bit about your thoughts. I've heard you speak on this before, and I think it's very down to earth. And we all want to try diets. And I had a patient say to me, they didn't like the first letter in diet, the first 3 letters in diet. That's what she said. Yeah, give us, and then we can hear from Lupe if she has any comments on that as well.
Yeah. So Lupe alluded to it a little bit earlier, and so did I. When I talk, I have patients ask me this question probably at least 4 times a week. Tell me what diet I should follow. Tell me what food I can and cannot eat. I get those questions all the time. And my answer is, your goal for eating is a balanced diet. Balanced eating is the same as mine, as your family's goal. It's not any different. That being said, it's still hard to do. So a lot of people ask about these fad diets. Now, unless you have a medical condition or an allergy, there's no need to really restrict foods, right? Or there's a cultural reason, right? So we don't recommend completely eliminating food groups out unless there's some other condition or specific reason why. So whenever you see a diet that eliminates something, that should be kind of a red flag to you. The reason why we don't recommend doing it is because it's not sustainable for most people, right? We talked a lot about how eating has a lot of cultural ties. There's a lot of social things around eating, right? So for example, if you look at something like the ketogenic diet, which has become really popular, I tell patients that we definitely see a blood sugar reduction, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you we don't see a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor tracing, or blood sugar that look more flat. We do, because you're eliminating the carbohydrates. But what can happen if you're following a keto diet, which is really high in fat, promotes a lot of animal fat as well, so the saturated fat you're consuming is higher, you may end up causing issues with your heart health later. We don't really have studies on that yet to say that. But if you're eating things a lot like cheese and bacon and high fat meats, like Lupe said earlier, that's not going to look as good for your insides, right? So really, keto diet, it's not really sustainable because it eliminates things like fruit, grains, beans, legumes, which we also get a lot of vitamins, minerals, and fiber from. So that's when I get a lot of questions about. I tell people, if you want to follow a lower carb diet, I ask them first, why are you doing keto? I want to get my blood sugars down. Okay, let's talk about that. So it's good to see, like, okay, if you want to get your blood sugars down and you're spiking up the most, for example, after dinner time meals, then maybe you can reduce carbs at dinner time only. And that can be a good first goal for you, right? So it's kind of doing your own version of what a lower carb diet would be versus doing an extreme of keto.
Yeah.
So that's a good kind of tip I give people when they ask me about ketogenic in particular.
Let me squeeze in a quick question that just came in. People were asking about the low carb pasta and bread alternatives, and is it better just to have a smaller portion of the real pasta and real bread versus, I know that you can buy bread that's very low in carbs and they sell low carb pasta. What's your comment on that? And also, let me add on another question that came in. How many grams of carbs per meal or per day do you recommend? I'm sure it depends on the patient's overall weight, things like that.
Yeah, very good questions. So typically I would say, if you, for most females, right, trying to kind of keep our weight in it. So it's just going to depend on the person, right? Like you said in the beginning, most of the time we can say for females who are trying to lose weight, like 30 to 45 is appropriate. Men can be 45 to 60. And that really depends on person to person. It's not just like a blanket. But if you're going to ask me kind of an overall recommendation, that's typically what we would say. Okay. Now, in terms of these products that are out there, like ketogenic bread, a lot of keto products that are out there are lower carb options. It's really up to you. If you want to have those products, it's fine for you to do that. But just make sure that if you're doing that and you're noticing, like, I'm switching over all my products to these low carb, my blood sugar is still going high, I haven't lost any weight. If you're doing that, but you're compensating calories in another form, that's not going to change your blood sugar, and that's not going to change your weight. Okay. So if you wanted to consume these, they're okay to do. It's also okay to have a regular slice of bread. Okay. Just make sure that you're giving insulin, that you cover for it correctly. So I never tell patients to switch over to these keto products or bars or breads or low carb options, unless they're coming to me and they're telling me, I want to reduce my carbohydrates. What do you think of these low carb tortillas, for example? We look at them together on the label. If it's something that they want to try, I encourage them to do it. I tell them that, we talk about how they figure out the overall carbohydrates on the package, because sometimes they take out the full fiber amount, for example. But they're okay to have, but just know that they can be more expensive sometimes. And if you end up eating more carbohydrates to compensate, you have to think about why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, Lupe, please comment on that, but also, after you finish commenting, there's a question that's been pointed towards you on the Facebook stream. What can you eat for snacks when you're starving and you're not supposed to, you're supposed to trying to stick to some type of meal plan, including bedtime snacks? What can you eat that's low in calories that won't spike your blood sugars as well?
Good question.
Oh.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. If Lupe has some good
I'm gonna let Lupe go first, and then you can jump on.
I wanted to comment first. I'll answer that, and then I wanted to comment and add on to what Adriana was saying. It is specific to that person, because I have had people ask me, what did you eat? What did you eat to lose the weight? Or, how do I eat? When I started out with an A1C of 12 and my glucose hitting 400, my main focus was to bring that down. So yes, I did cut carbs and focused on proteins and veggies and foods very low in the glycemic index. My goal was to bring my A1C down. Once that was down and I started, my activity level started picking up, that was not going to be sustainable for me. So as a runner, I run anywhere between 5 to 6 miles every other day. I walk 3 miles on those alternate days. And then on the weekend, I will run anywhere between 9 to 20 miles getting ready for my next marathon. So I need carbs. So for me, I need to eat those foods. And so it just depends. And I think this is the very a scary slope that we get into, is that just because you're switching to those low calorie foods and you're switching to the low carb foods, sometimes we think that because we're eating those labels, we're compensating, we're eating more of them and not moving. So that's why we're gaining weight. And I'm not a dietitian. I can just share what my experience is, but sitting down having a diet pasta or a low carb pasta, but then not adding any physical activity is not going to do anything for you. Yeah. But if I eat a regular regular white pasta, but then I'm out there moving, that's going to do a lot more to my health than the other, because I'm moving. Everything works together. And that's been my experience. In fact, I just had my A1C checked and it's still at 5.4, and my carbs have dramatically increased from this time last year because I have to compensate for my movement. As far as
I want to just jump in there and say I really appreciate you saying that, because a lot of times people feel guilty about eating the regular foods, but it's it's like portion control and it's exercise, and it's just not very satisfying eating fake bread and pasta. No. But I wanted you to get to the second question too, about I think what a lot of people are asking, is what are the best snacks to eat? And I think you had some ideas, and then I'll let Adriana jump on after you.
So for me, it's two parts. One, if I do want a snack, you can have hard-boiled eggs. If you need that carb, if you need something crunchy, maybe air pop popcorn, nuts. But what I have found is when I'm consistent in my exercise routine, I don't have those cravings at night. A lot of times, the way we eat, or not a lot of times, I think it is a big part of it. It's we tend to eat because our minds are not well. And this goes back to me, kind of preaching that it's a holistic view, right? If I'm happy with myself, if I'm okay with myself, am I really hungry? I just had dinner. Am I really hungry? Or am I trying to have a snack because I'm compensating for something else that's going on? Go for a walk. Go for a walk. Read a book. Listen to a podcast, but if I have to eat something because I haven't eaten all day, then, grab some nuts, keep some hard-boiled eggs in your freezer. And you're not in your freezer, in your refrigerator.
That'd be hard to eat.
It would be some fruit. I love avocado, and that's a good fat. So, sometimes it'll just be avocado and a hard-boiled egg. So there are some things that, research and look at foods low in the glycemic index. But again, my main point is to ask yourself, why do you need to have that snack?
Yeah. Adriana, I know you got some things to say, but I think the thing is, a lot of people, when they hold back their calories so much, they can do very well during the day, and then they get what my friend calls the werewolf syndrome. When the sun goes down, they start eating everything in sight. I like to snack on nuts, but nuts the calories will add up, but they do suppress your appetite. They do for me. Egg beaters is a great option because it's so low in calories and cholesterol. And for some of you folks out there, they're not marathon runners like Lupe, and I'm not either, but her point is any type of exercise you can do. And whether it's exercycle, a treadmill, even one of those ergometer things, if your legs aren't good, where you can get your arms moving quickly and you can get your heart rate up. So any type of motion and activities would be key, and do it with a friend. Okay, Adriana, I know that this is the age-old question, but what could we eat that's not going to cause us to gain a ton of weight and wreck our blood sugars?
For snack time, you mean, right?
Yeah,
Specifically.
anything.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about the snacks. So Lupe had some really good points. I have patients ask about snacks a lot. Usually, so first of all, it's going to really depend on your medication regimen too. Okay. So if you're taking insulin before every single meal, then you may be trying to aim for a more low carb snack. Okay. And if you're somebody just on oral medication or taking insulin once a day, you might have more flexibility in your plan to have carbohydrates. Okay. So I'll say that first. Now, usually we say if you're going to go more than 4 hours with between meals, it's good to incorporate a snack. And that's just to help keep you from overeating at your next meal. Okay. That's really the point of that. Now, everybody's different, right? But most of the time, if you eat breakfast at 7 a.m. and you don't eat lunch till 2, you're going to end up overeating at the 2 o'clock meal. So some good snack ideas that are low carb. Lupe mentioned one is something like hard boiled eggs. You can do things like olives, nuts, nut butter, like peanut or almond butter with something like celery or carrots, for example. Of course, everybody's favorite vegetables as well, right? So you can do cherry tomatoes. You can make like a caprese salad, right? That has the tomato, mozzarella, basil. You can do any kind of vegetable. You can steam some as well. You can do a heart healthy cheese, like a mozzarella cheese stick, a Baby Bell, for example, too. Or the Laughing Cow is another one patients like to have. So those are some good low carb snacks. You can also do something like seaweed chips. Those are low carb. Some snacks that are going to be higher in carb, that are going to have some carb, are going to be something like the popcorn Lupe mentioned. That's a really good snack for people who like chips. That's lower in calories and lower in carbohydrates. You can do a protein carb combination, like a slice of whole wheat bread, regular or keto, depends on what you want to do. You can do some nut butter on top, a little bit of cheese. You can throw in the microwave a quick quesadilla, like a corn tortilla with some cheese on it. You can do crackers with a little bit of hummus, for example. Again, the veggies with hummus. Any of those are snacks that you can incorporate in that have some carbohydrates as well, will keep you full. So it's really up to you, your medication regimen in terms of what you're going to pick.
Adriana, I am starving now after that laundry list of good snacks. Seriously, I appreciate that. You mentioned people who eat breakfast early and don't eat anything till much later. Can you just give us a one-liner on the intermittent fasting diet craze that's out there? And I just want to say one thing. I read a big article about all the different diets, and at the very end, they said it comes down to, different diets for different folks. And certain intermittent fasting may work for somebody that is not hungry in the morning and doesn't feel like eating. And for others, they could eat 3 meals at lunchtime if they wait too long. So I don't know. What do you think about that? The intermittent fasting. That's kind of a local craze.
That's a good question. So that's become a diet that we get a lot of questions about now too. So intermittent fasting, to kind of put it in a nutshell for you, there's different types, but the most popular one is where you eat within an 8-hour period of time. Okay, so you're fasting the entire rest of the day. Now with intermittent fasting, you usually don't cut food groups out. So you're not really saying like, oh, I can't have pizza or cheese or legumes. So I would say, I agree with you. It kind of just depends on what works best for you. Intermittent fasting, I like the idea that it doesn't eliminate groups, right? So you can still enjoy foods with your family. It's something that there's a lot of research on now and has been showing that there's a lot of possible benefits with like sleep health and other functions of our body. So I would never tell a patient, hey, I think this is a good diet to follow. This is the one you should do. But if I have a patient who asks me about it, I don't discourage them from doing it. I will say that, like I said, I think it's more long-term. You can follow it more in the long-term sense because you're not eliminating groups. I will say this, it's safe for people to do who have diabetes if your insulin regimen is appropriate. Okay, I get questions about that all the time. So I say, if you're going to do intermittent fasting, let your diabetes providers know so they can maybe adjust your insulin, but you shouldn't be going low. That shouldn't be something that should prevent you from doing it. So it's kind of the new diet that's out there. There's a lot of cool research going on about it. So if somebody wants to do it, I encourage them to try it. But like you said, it's really more about thinking the sustainability and long-term effects of any diet that you're going to follow.
Okay. Lupe, I have a question for you. You're not a dietitian, neither am I, but what are your feelings about artificial sweeteners?
I use them. I use them in moderation in my coffee. I use Splenda specifically. I found stevia gives me a headache. But like I said, in moderation. In my cooking, I don't use artificial sweeteners. It's normally just in my coffee. Like anything, in moderation, I would think it's okay. I do drink diet sodas.
Cheers.
Depending on my day, I may have more than 1 12-ounce can. So, but I definitely try to limit those.
Well, you're a woman after my own heart because everything in moderation. I love Splenda and I love Diet Coke, and I don't like the taste of stevia. I know it's natural, but you know what drives me crazy? You go into these coffee shops and they don't have Splenda. They have the stevia only because they only serve natural stuff. So I got to carry mine with me. And Adriana's going to tell us how many packets of Splenda we can have a day safely. And that's going to make us feel really good about ourselves.
So I'll say we get a lot of questions about artificial sweeteners, and they are found to be safe to consume from the FDA. Now, if you look online, there's something called an acceptable daily intake that's considered to be like a safe amount from each artificial sweetener has a slightly different amount. We calculated it out one time for Dr. Edelman. I think it was it for Splenda?
Yeah.
And how many packets? So there's an amount that it tells you, there's like an equation, and it says that based on your body weight, you can have X amount of artificial sweetener, right? That's considered to be safe still in the studies. So it just kind of depends on your body weight, right? But how many did we figure out was for you?
100. I can have 110 packets a day and still be safe.
Yay!
So, you know what? I mean, there's a lot of crazy articles you can read on the internet about, there was a time when they said artificial sweeteners cause weight gain. And, you and I talked about it, Adriana, on one of our videos on the TCOYD website, and there's just no rationale for that. And so in any case, I think any individual listening today, you got to, anything you can do to reduce a calorie, low calorie drinks. There's so many good ones out there.